Hello guys, my name is Pios and this is part 2 of the Elastic series. In the first video we talked about Elasticsearch in general. We take a look to our solution and we register our Elastic client. In this video we will create our index. So let's go to our project and we'll create a folder called Elastic, which will contain everything specific to Elastic. And first of all, we're going to need an object that will represent our songs for the Elasticsearch, and that's what we will store in the Elastic. So let's call that Elastic song. Elastic song, okay. Let me make this bigger. Alright, and now let me copy and paste some properties and talk about them. Okay, we'll have the ID, the title, the album release date, the artist name, and the genre. The genre, if you remembered, was an entity in our database and has an ID and a name. Now you might say that it would make more sense to store the ID of the genre as well, so we can search by that and then return the genre as a string and also the ID if we want to. But I want to showcase an example that we will filter based on a string property, and you'll see in a second why. But for now let's decorate our properties, because in order for Elastic to know how to store them and analyze them, we will talk about analyzers in a second, we have to give it instructions, and we will do that by decorating our properties. So that will be a number, and as you can see, the first suggestion is the number from the Nest library that we previously installed. So number, and let's specify the number type. So number type, it will be a long. And now for the title, let's say text, since it's a string. But Elastic, in order to apply the search text and do all that stuff that we talked in the introduction of the previous video, will actually take that string and broke it down into tokens and index them for fast search and retrieval. And that's why I added the genre only as string, because when we don't need to search with the input in a specific field and we want them to be as a filter, so we don't need Elastic to break it down and analyze it. We only just want to store it, and the search with an exact match is a filter. We have to decorate them not with the text attribute but with the keyword, so be careful to that. And now all the other properties are string. We could also store the album ID, the artist ID, etc., but we will keep it simple. So let's do that for all the others. And now we have our object that will be stored in Elastic. Sorry, that's an interruption from the future. I accidentally decorated the album release date as a text, but we don't want to apply full text search to the release date. It will be a keyword. And also, since we are talking about analyzers and how Elastic will analyze and broke down our text, that's a good time to tell you that in the text attribute we can specify an analyzer. If we don't, we will get the default one, and that's what we want in our scenario. But if, let's say for example, that the titles of the songs were in Greek, we would have to specify a Greek analyzer. Again, sorry for the interruption, I'm leaving. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a service, and I will call that initialize index service. So initialize index service, and we will have one method in here and we will use it for initializing the index. Now you could argue that we can have an Elastic service and apply the search and the index in the same service and do different methods, but for the initialize we will need the app to be context, and there is no need to inject that every time we apply a search, and that would be the case if we have the two methods in the same service. So I separate them, like if we were using a mediator, they will be two different commands. So we will need the appdb context in the Elastic client, so private read-only I appdb context, and let's call that context, and private read-only I Elastic client, and let's call that Elastic client. Let's initialize those properties through the constructor. And now let's have a public async task, and since the service is called initializing text service, let's call that method run. Now let's take the index from the app settings, so we will also need the configuration, and let's inject that as well. Private read-only I configuration. Let's get the index, so var index equals with configuration dot get value, and if you remember, it was the elastic and index, so elastic and index. And for this example, every time we start the application, we will delete a previous index if exists, and we'll create a new one. So we'll say await elastic client dot delete async, and we need to pass the name of the index that we want to delete. Elastic client dot indices, and then delete async and pass the index name. And now to create our index, and we will take actually a response back, so let's say var response equals await elastic client dot indices dot create async, and let's pass the index, and also let's specify some things in here. We need to map to the elastic song, so elastic song that we previously created, and we want elastic to automap that, so x.automap, so it can map it based on our attributes in that elastic song object. Okay, now you can check for the response if it's valid, so let's say if not response dot is valid, I don't know, do something, so let's put that in a comment. And now we need to take all the songs from the database, so var songs equals with await context dot songs dot, let's say as no tracking, dot include the album, and then include the genre, and the album will not be null, we know that. And we also need to include the artist, so we'll say again include album, and then include the artist, and we know again that the album won't be null. And finally, let's say to list async, so that we will have our songs, and now we need to map them to the elastic songs, so let's create a mapper for that. Let's actually create a mappers class, and let's make it static so we can have extension methods, and let me copy and paste the mapper so you don't have to see me typing it, and that's it. And we store the release date as a string, so we can retrieve them back from our API as a string, because it's a date only, and I didn't want to have a lot of mappings from date time to date only, etc., so that it can be more simple this way. Okay, back to our initialize service now. Let's say that var elastic songs equals with songs dot select x and x to elastic song, Okay, so now we have our Elastic songs, and now to add them to the Elastic there are a lot of ways and you can configure a lot of options, but we will go with the simplest one here. So let's say await elastic client.bulk async, and let's specify the index. So the index will be the elastic index that we previously take from the configuration. And now we need to say index many and pass the objects that we want to index, and that will be our elastic songs. That also returns a response, so you can act on that if it's valid or not, but let's leave it there for now. And now finally let's go to our program.cs, because we said that we want that to run every time we run our project. So let's do that in here. Let's say using var scope equals with app.services.createScope. Then let's retrieve the initialize index service. So var initialize index service equals with scope.serviceprovider.get required service of type initialize index service, and let's run that. So initialize service.run, and we also need to register that so we can retrieve that from the DI container. So let's go in here and say builder.services.add, let's say scoped, and actually let's make an interface for that. Not required and probably don't need it, but let's do that anyway. Okay, so that will be initialize index service, and now we will add a scope the initialize index service with its implementation. Let me also show you some things from the database that we will be working on. So let's create a new query, and let's first see the count of the artists that I have included. So select the count from artists. We have 15 artists. Let's see the albums. So the albums are 360, and finally let's see the songs, and the songs are 5,119. Not a lot, but also not a small amount. I think it's good for an example dataset. And that would be all. In the next video we will run a Docker image with Elastic, and we will apply our search so we can see it all in action. So let's leave it there for now. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching and have a nice one.